The Tower of Malevolence, also known as the Harbinger of Disaster, suddenly appeared around the world. Numerous monsters emerged from the tower, plunging humanity into a state of hopelessness as these creatures brought mankind to the brink of extinction. Just when all seemed lost, the first generation of Awakeners appeared. Known as the Founders, they managed to suppress the monsters and eventually conquer and destroy the tower. This victory marked humanity's first triumph against the invasion from another dimension. The Founders were hailed as heroes, and their legacies are commemorated at the Mausoleum of the Founders. A century later, our protagonist, Kanagi Minato, enjoys reading about their legends, which are available in the library. He reads about the great swordsman who, with a mere wooden stick from a tree branch, managed to cut down a 10,000-strong army, and the wise wizard who could chant any magic without incantation. In the current era, these tales are regarded as mere legends or fairy tales. Despite this, Kanagi dreams of marking his name in history, just like the Founders. He knows he possesses the seal of the Chosen Ones. A crest has appeared on his body. With that crest, he pledges to make his name as an Awakened, just as the Founders did. Tragically, while his classmates cheer for passing their qualification test, Kanagi remains silent, staring at his phone, which shows that he failed the Hunter's qualification test. In tears, he watches everyone celebrate around him. His classmates tease him, saying they will go to the party to celebrate their admission and ask him to clean some trash. As an Awakened, he knows that writing down their name guarantees passing the test. But he has failed for 3 years in a row and is mocked as a disgrace. This was his last chance to take the test, and he now believes he can never become a hunter. He picks up the trash in the classroom, sadly reflecting that despite getting a full score on the written test and training his aura, his crest seems useless, more like a scar than a blessing. With tears in his eyes, holding a trash can, he shouts that he also wants to be like the Founders. Suddenly, a man calls his name, telling him to hurry to the school gate. Startled, he stutteringly replies that he completely forgot. Sighing, he thinks that if possible, he wants to be idolized and cheered on like the Founders. At the gate, the students are talking about the man standing before them. Izaki Kaise, an rank hunter, smiles apologetically to everyone for causing the commotion. Meanwhile, Hizaki's minions shout at him, saying he's late and making Hizaki wait, to which he stutteringly apologizes. Hizaki walks over to his minions, telling them to stop, and asks if he was right that it wasn't like he was bullying the weak. One of his minions tries to explain, but Hizaki, with a creepy smile, asks if they saw the reporters behind him. His minions quickly apologize. One of the reporters then tells Hizaki that they are looking forward to the documentary, and shows Hizaki his picture, saying they would like to use it as the cover. The reporter explains that it was taken at the moment he defeated a dragon with a single slash of his sword, and asks Hizaki what he thinks about it. Hizaki replies that it's a really good picture but a bit embarrassing. Kanagi and Hizaki enrolled in the academy together 3 years ago. Hizaki was a genius who scored at the top of the class in every subject. During their time together, Hizaki has been bullying Kanagi. Kanagi can't believe he needs to spend an entire day with Hizaki during the documentary, making him wonder why Hizaki wants him there. The reporter asks Hizaki who the person behind him is. Hizaki replies that he wants to introduce someone from the same academy generation, but then whisperingly asks one of his minions what his name is again. The minion replies, Kanagi Minato, which Hizaki then tells the reporter. Hizaki adds that although Kanagi's grades aren't great, he always asks Hizaki for favors, leaving him with almost no time for his training. He also claims that he gives Kanagi advice and guidance, leaving Kanagi stunned and confused. Kanagi is even more surprised when Hizaki tells the reporters that Kanagi sometimes asks for financial support. Kanagi knows this is bullshit because, while Hizaki always took his money, Kanagi never asked for anything from him. He had never experienced such a pathetic year in his life before. The reporter, amazed by Hizaki's story, tells Hizaki that he is the embodiment of perfection. Hizaki then grabs Kanagi, shouting to the reporters to look forward to it because he will be an Awakened who will write history. The reporter then shouts to Kanagi, saying he must be happy to receive Hizaki's kindness and asks if he has any words for his benefactor. Kanagi is about to respond that there is no way he would do it, but Hizaki whispers to him that he failed the test and is completely worthless, so they should settle this peacefully. Hizaki squeezes Kanagi's shoulder tightly, making him remember the bullying. Smiling in fear, Kanagi tells the reporter that he is completely grateful for everything Hizaki has done for him and that there are no words to describe his gratitude. After that, Hizaki walks forward, leaving Kanagi behind, and tells the reporter that since they don't have much time, they should move on to the next topic. Hizaki points to his trophies, leaving Kanagi shaking in fear. Kanagi hears someone behind him questioning if they really need his name in the article, but one of the reporters responds that they don't because no one would be interested anyway. Kanagi realizes that even if someone is evil, as long as they have the power to become a hunter, everyone would be on their side and their name would be remembered. He He tries to stop the tears in his eyes while stutteringly saying his name. Suddenly, someone shouts his name, shocking him. He sees Hizaki and his minions walking closer, with Hizaki telling him to come to the mausoleum of the founders after school. Kannagi asks why and wonders what is happening and what will happen after, but Hizaki just smiles and asks if he wants to take a re-examination, confusing Kannagi even more. Hizaki tells him that he will talk to the association. When Kannagi asks why Hizaki is doing this, Hizaki responds that it's a way to increase his popularity. And the last scene of the documentary is set at the mausoleum, so they need to film there and discuss it afterwards. Hizaki then warns him that he must come. Kannagi wonders if this is real but thinks that even though he hates the idea of being used by Hizaki to increase his popularity, it's another chance for him regardless of the situation. He smiles, swearing that this time, he will pass for sure. Later, in the mausoleum of the founders, the reporter captures footage of Hizaki, saying, "At the mausoleum of the founders, a single top-class hunter pledges to protect humanity's future, and this moment is truly picture perfect." After that, the reporters tell Hizaki they managed to take a good picture and thank him for his time during his busy day. Hizaki replies that he looks forward to the article. Once the reporters leave, Hizaki moves further into the mausoleum. When he arrives where his minions are waiting, he asks if they have found the entry point. His minions excitedly reply that they have and point to a secret pathway, asking if it is the one they were looking for. Suddenly, someone asks from behind what they are doing. Hizaki nonchalantly asks if he hasn't figured it out yet, and tells him it's a treasure hunt. Kannagi angrily shouts at Hizaki, calling him a grave bandit and asking if he even understands who is resting in that place. Hizaki responds that of course he knows, but then he kicks one of the founders' statues and asks if he's right that it's only the rotten bodies of the past. He explains that they couldn't let the chance slip away to become millionaires and dismisses the importance of the founders' remains, saying they are just dead bodies and don't matter. Kannagi acknowledges that the founders were amazing, which is why he wants to be like them, an awakened whose name is marked in history. Enraged, Kannagi rushes to attack Hizaki, calling him a bastard. However, Hizaki sidesteps swiftly and punches him hard in the stomach, making him cough up blood. He collapses to the ground, clutching his stomach in pain, while Hizaki berates him for daring to attack. Hizaki continues to assault him, making him think he might die. But then one of Hizaki's minions calls out, saying they've found something and shows a lot of valuable items, which shocks him. Hizaki grabs a circular crystal and excitedly asks if the aura is emitting from the item itself. Hizaki shouts that it's wonderful and that with it, he could live without needing to work for the rest of his life. Kannagi tries to stop them, shouting not to touch it, but his voice fails to come out. Hizaki then grabs him by the shirt and says he'll explain it as simply as possible so a failure like him can understand. Hizaki reveals that he had been looking for a weakling like him all along, having tricked him with the promise of a re-examination. He knew about Kannagi visiting the library all the time and found it amusing. Finally, Hizaki declares he has found a useful pawn. Hizaki then drags him outside, smilingly shouting that he dreamed of becoming a hunter, so he finally decided to steal the treasures of the mausoleum and go missing, which is a tragic story. Kannagi stutteringly tells Hizaki to stop the bullshit, but Hizaki continues, saying it will be tomorrow's top news. Hizaki then lifts him over a cliff, telling him that after robbing the mausoleum of the founders and escaping from the police, the culprit will be a third-year hunter from the training academy. Hizaki then lets go of him and mockingly asks for his name again. Kannagi looks at Hizaki in anger and fear, but Hizaki tells him that knowing his name doesn't matter now and says goodbye. Kannagi falls into the river, wondering if this is how he will die after all the training and tests. He thinks everything was meaningless because he is fading away without being remembered by anyone. Suddenly, lights appear around him and many figures surround him. He hears them saying that he will be their vessel and grant their wish. The figures introduce themselves as the heroic spirits sealed in that place, the very souls of the founders. Shocked, he wonders what this means, hearing voices and seeing lights from the founders. One of the founders tells him that the crest on his hand is the crest of nothingness. It doesn't possess any power by itself, but it can manifest any power he could have never imagined. The voice tells him to choose one of them and form a contract because they are the pinnacle of every art: magic, endurance, swordsmanship, spearmanship, summoning magic, alchemy, and more. Whoever he chooses, he will gain power from that benefactor. The voice asks him whose power he seeks. He initially thinks of wanting power like Hizaki's but changes his mind. He responds that he wants a power incomparable in the world, a power to overwhelm everything and wipe away all the humiliations he endured. Another voice then tells him to decide whom he chooses. Kannagi replies that he wants everything and all of their powers, they should give him everything. The founders consider him greedy, thinking it's impossible, as no matter how strong the vessel is, taking everything would be a mess. But Kannagi absorbs them all, shouting at them to shut up and, instead of yapping their mouths, to enter him. Kanagi pushes himself to absorb all the heroic spirits, causing mixed reactions among the founders. Some panic, some are amazed, others don't care, and some wonder who he is. Eventually, he absorbs all of them. From atop the hill, Hizaki looks back when he sees a light emerging from the river. Suddenly, the river rises as if something exploded beneath it, making everyone turn and wonder what is happening. Kanagi then flies out of the river, landing on the hill in front of Hizaki and his minions with different hair and eye colors. One of Hizaki's minions sneers, saying Kanagi crawled back like a tenacious roach. Kanagi breaks a small branch off a long branch and swings it at Hizaki's minions, who are shocked and ask what the hell he is doing. Hizaki's minions then teasingly laugh at him, asking if he really intends to fight them with a stick. Kanagi continues to swing his stick, prompting Hizaki to sigh and tell his minions to end it, ensuring Kanagi doesn't crawl back again. Hizaki orders his minions to cut Kanagi's head off. One of the minions grabs his sword and arrogantly replies to Hizaki that he understands. He taunts Kanagi, saying that based on the recent exam, his sword aura is a rank and he has mastered the way of the swordsman. He tells Kanagi to be grateful to be cut down by him. Kanagi simply responds, mastering the way of the swordsman. The man then jumps towards Kanagi, slashing at him with his sword. Smiling, the man stops behind him, but then blood begins to pour from all over his body and head as if he had been slashed. The man screams in pain, while Hizaki and the other minion look on in shock, unable to believe what they are seeing. Kanagi then tells the man that he has mastered the way of the swordsman and asks him what kind of swordsmanship he uses. The other minion casts a spell, calling upon the green cradle and the gaze of destruction. Kanagi points his finger at the minion and tells him that he is slow. He then attacks the minion with a spell, Thunderbolt Haddad, without any incantation. The minion cannot believe it, and a powerful thunderbolt strikes him, electrocuting him to death. Hizaki cannot believe that Kanagi cut down his minion with nothing but a mere branch and cast magic without any incantation. Hizaki recalls the legend of a great swordsman who, long ago, cut down a 10,000-strong army with only a single wooden stick, and a wizard who could chant any magic without incantation. In the current era, these stories are considered mere legends or fairy tales. Now, the souls of the awakeners that slumbered in the mausoleum of the founders dwell within Kanagi Minato. There are 106 souls inside his body. Kanagi remembers Hizaki telling everyone that he would mark his name in history as an awakened. He walks closer to Hizaki, declaring that his name shall not be forgotten and that he shall be remembered eternally, including the new myth about him. Kanagi stops approaching Hizaki, unable to believe that he managed to absorb the souls of the founders with his crest of nothingness. He hears the founders inside him, content and excited, marveling at the spaciousness of their new home. They ask how many centuries it has been since they were freed from boredom. Kanagi smiles, feeling the founders' happiness. He had memorized their legends for a long time, and now their souls are inside him. However, the founders decide it will be a race to see who gets to control his body. The great swordsman, Hinoki Riikairu, calls to Kanagi, surprising him. Hinoki remarks that it is expected to be remembered after such a long time. He asks Kanagi what he plans to do. Kanagi asks if he means dealing with Hizaki, but Hinoki dismisses Hizaki as trash and points behind him, asking what Kanagi will do about that. Shocked, Kanagi walks closer to Hizaki, who stutteringly tells him to stay away, and not to look down on a rank hunter like him. Kanagi punches Hizaki in the face, sending him spinning in midair from the force. Kanagi then faces the bag that is releasing a dark aura and tells Hizaki to get out of the way. He focuses on the bag, and suddenly, a strong power emanates from it, surprising him. Hinoki, however, smiles calmly. Meanwhile, in the city, a Cerberus is attacking everything in its path. A man shouts to Kisaragi to handle it. Kisaragi faces the beast, and when it lunges at him, he jumps above it and attacks with a waterfall impact from above. The people cheer in amazement, shouting that Kisaragi instantly killed an A-rank monster. The S-rank hunter, Kisaragi, thanks them for their compliments and asks where Hizaki is. The man tells Kisaragi that because of an interview, it must be nice to be called a young hope. But Kisaragi tells the man not to say it like that. If Hizaki becomes more popular, their guild's reputation will also rise. They decide to get a drink after filing a report when they hear a strong growl and feel intense pressure. Everyone panics, wondering if it is a demon. Kisaragi looked back when he heard his team in pain and saw normal people collapsing and hunters struggling because of the pressure. He noticed that A-rank and B-rank hunters couldn't stand against it, indicating it was an S-rank monster, so Kisaragi immediately made a call. Meanwhile, on the street, people passed out due to the pressure, which was coming from the mausoleum of the founders. Hizaki, shakingly sitting up, was surprised to see a huge monster emerging from the bag in front of them. He asked if it was a demon and what the hell it was. Kanagi replied that it was because Hizaki had opened the mausoleum, releasing one of the boss monsters from the tower that was sealed there. The seal was undone when Hizaki took the items away. Hinoki confirmed this, explaining that some demons from the tower survived by hiding and becoming dormant. He identified the demon as the embodiment of emptiness, a stacked-eyed tiger estimated to be above S rank in danger level. Hizaki tried to stand up, shaking, while Hinoki explained that the stacked-eyed tiger is a living disaster that kills numerous humans within a few kilometers with its poisonous aura. This demon was quite common during their era, but now it was overwhelmingly powerful for the youngsters of this era. Panicking, Hizaki ran away, shouting that he needed to escape or else he would be killed. Kanagi warned Hizaki that it was better not to move, as the tiger targets moving objects. The stacked-eyed tiger saw Hizaki running and immediately lashed out with one of its tentacles. Hizaki, covering himself with his sword and shouting at the demon to stay away, was helpless as the tentacle pierced his chest. Despite having slain a dragon with his sword before, Hizaki couldn't stop the demon from spreading its tentacles inside his body. The stacked-eyed tiger began to absorb Hizaki, making him scream in pain. Kanagi simply told him that he had warned him. Hinoki then wrapped his hand around Kanagi and asked if he would give his body to him completely. Hinoki then asked if Kanagi wanted to see the founder Hinoki's one-handed sword style, thinking he would take the vessel while the others were distracted. Kanagi responded that he didn't mind lending his body, to which Hinoki excitedly agreed. However, another founder grabbed Hinoki and accused him of trying to run away with such a strong vessel, claiming it for themselves. Realizing he had been noticed, Hinoki tried to calm everyone down. They all stopped when Kanagi told them he had one condition: he would only lend his body to everyone. This confused them. Kanagi tells the founders that he will definitely surpass all of them and, in time, reach the same heights they did. He also wants to see how strong he will become. He then challenges them to show him what they've got. Hinoki wonders what Kanagi's deal is, thinking he's insane while drawing his sword. Hinoki then takes control of Kanagi's body and shouts to the other founders that they should join in. He slashes the demon with the stick, aided by Hinoki, severing one of the demon's arms. The demon launches its other arm to attack, but Kanagi, while looking at the chopped stick in his hand, manages to dodge as another founder possesses his body. He then uses his hand to cut the demon's arm, shocking the demon. Kanagi grabs a huge stick from the ground, and the spearman founder possesses his body, using the stick as a spear to attack the demon. Another founder then possesses him, allowing him to easily dodge the demon's attacks. The old founder takes over, enabling Kanagi to grab the demon's tentacle and slam it into the ground with immense force. The demon is flung into the air, and Kanagi grabs the bag. The archer founder possesses him, and he aims and successfully hits the demon in the head. It screams in pain as its blood spreads around. Kanagi wipes his face and continuously attacks the demon in different ways as the founders possess his body one by one. Hinoki then takes control again and grabs Hizaki's broken sword from the ground. The demon attempts a surprise underground attack, but Kanagi's eyes turn yellow as the great wizard possesses him and electrocutes the demon. He then jumps, and when he is above it, Hinoki uses his one-handed sword style, Gekurautachi wave-cutting blade, to slash the demon in half, killing it. Kanagi smiles victoriously. Meanwhile, a raven perched on a tree watches everything that just happened. In the city, a man floating in mid-air answers his phone, incredulous that the demon was already defeated when he was just about to head over there. He asks if there are any strong hunters nearby. The person on the other line responds that, based on footage from the raven, it was a student of the academy. The man, surprised, acknowledges this. The world's strongest awakened, Ikehara Midori, then tells the person on the other line that he wants to meet that student. The next morning, Ikehara is sitting on a pile of dead monsters, calling the director and informing him about the S-rank demon. The director asks if Ikehara defeated it, but he replies that it was not him. Based on footage from his raven, it was Kanagi Minato who defeated it. Ikehara mentions that Kanagi failed the hunter's examination 3 years in a row, which makes it hard for him to believe. He then asks the director if he could do him a favor. Meanwhile, at the academy, students are asking each other if they were okay yesterday because the aura was so awful that they couldn't move. One student jokes with his friend, asking what he would do if he told him that it was actually him who killed the monster. The friend dismisses it as impossible, noting that it has been 10 years since the last emergence of an S-rank hunter. However, the friend reminds him of a rumor that the one who defeated the monster was actually a student from the academy. Kanagi walking with a stick to support his shaking, while the other student dismisses the idea, thinking no hunter could defeat that demon, and if there were such a person, he wouldn't be in their academy. Kanagi is amazed that the only topic of conversation today is yesterday's incident. Suddenly, a man bumps him aside, telling him he's in the way. Kanagi falls to the floor, and the man thinks there is no way such a loser could be the S-rank slayer while looking at him. Kanagi knows he defeated the demon yesterday, but it was because he lent his body to the founders. Now, his body is painfully torn apart as they recoil. Someone then laughingly asks him if he is completely okay with it, and when he looks up, he sees it as Hinoki. Hinoki tells him to get a grip and asks if he wanted to surpass them. Kanagi remembers saying it last night and confidently responds that he did. He pushes himself to stand up while Hinoki laughingly tells him to show his guts. Hinoki looks at the students and notices that the level of the awakeners in this era is too low, more or less the same as normal humans, which he considers trash. Hinoki also thinks that if the tower were to emerge right at that moment, the world would surely end. But then Hinoki is surprised to sense someone with a strong aura. Kanagi asks Hinoki what is wrong, but Hinoki replies it's nothing, though he thinks that just now he felt a tremendous aura. Suddenly, a professor shouted for Kanagi to hurry up and come over. Apologizing, Kanagi asked if it was his letter of resignation, knowing that he had only 3 chances to take the test and that the hunter's qualification test can only be taken from the training academy, meaning he would need to start over from the general admission slot. However, the professor told him to go to the field immediately because it was his re-examination, which surprised him. A moment later, the students watched from the window, wondering if there had ever been a hunter re-examination test before, but no one knew. Meanwhile, in the field, Kanagi's mission was a 100-meter sprint, with an average time of 3.6 seconds and a best record of 2.7 seconds. He knew he was not in perfect condition but needed to give his best. The man who had pushed him earlier told the students that Kanagi was famous for being a failure even in the teacher's office, and that giving him a chance after 3 years of failure was just sympathy. However, when Kanagi began to run, everyone was shocked when he completed it in 1.2 seconds. In the next test, his mission was to complete a 3,000-meter sprint with an average time of 4 minutes and 20 seconds and a best record of 3 minutes and 17 seconds. To everyone's astonishment, he finished it in 1 minute and 17 seconds. The next test was push-ups in 2 minutes, with an average of 215 push-ups and a best record of 418 push-ups, but he managed 840 push-ups. The next test was the bench press, with an average weight of 4,000 kilograms and a best record of 620 kilograms, yet he lifted 1,280 kilograms. The students were shocked and asked what he was because he beat all the best records by more than double, and the ladies thought he was cool. Kanagi wondered if the founders were still lending him with their powers, but Hinoki knew they wouldn't help with something like this and that they hadn't done anything. Meanwhile, in the headmaster's office, the headmaster gave Ikahara all the current records of Kanagi Minato. Ikahara thanked the headmaster and was amazed at Kanagi's records. The headmaster told Ikahara that when he heard about the request for re-examination, he thought something was wrong. Even though Kanagi's physical abilities are amazing, the real issue is his magic capacity because, in all the tests over the past 3 years, Kanagi's capacity was immeasurable, and he essentially had no mana, so the headmaster thought it would be a waste of their attention. Ikahara's secretary commented that this was what they expected of Kanagi, but Ikahara just laughed and said they would see about it. Meanwhile, in the field, he was taking the magic measurement test. The professor asked if he understood how the measurement worked and explained that he had to use his magic to spin the giant fans within 30 seconds. The number of rotations would determine his score. He replied that he did. The average score for the test was 1,513 spins, and the best record was 4,022 spins. He stretched out his hand, remembering that in the past 3 years, he couldn't even move the fans, no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't control mana because he couldn't feel it at all, but now he could feel it circulating around him. From his right foot, it flowed upward into his body, circling inside him and returning to his right foot. He also knew that he could accelerate the cycle with his breathing and release it through the palm of his right hand. The professor then shouted for him to start. He released his mana into the fan, and the count machine began to register the spins. Suddenly, the fan spun rapidly, speeding up the count and shocking the professors. The fan turned so fast that the counting machine couldn't keep up, and the air from the fan made it difficult for the professors to see the score. Then, the machine holding the fan exploded, and the fan flew away. It soared towards a building, causing the students to panic, and crashed directly into the headmaster's office, causing a loud explosion. The headmaster narrowly avoided being hit and collapsed from the shock. Ikahara's secretary was in disbelief, but Ikahara laughed, saying it seemed Kanagi and he were alike. Ikahara then looked at him, declaring that Kanagi was the second person in history after him to achieve an immeasurable score. The professor, who had witnessed everything, shouted that he had passed the hunter examination. The students cheered for him, exclaiming that he had achieved the best record in every test. He looked at his hand in disbelief, tears streaming down his face, and thanked them profusely, amazed that the power had been inside him all this time. Hinoki smiled, expecting this outcome, and Kanagi knew that by lending his body to the founders, the potential within him had been awakened. Laughingly, Hinoki told him that he was not an ordinary person with the crest of nothingness and that he had been waiting for him for more than a century. Hinoki then asked if they would agree and Kanagi might fulfill their wish, believing that he might be the one they had been waiting for. Just then, a strong aura landed in front of him, shocking him. He stutteringly asked what it was and if it was an explosion, but Hinoki recognized it as the tremendous aura he had felt that morning. Ikehara greeted him, and he was stunned to see the legendary figure standing before him. Ikehara congratulated him on his hunter examination results. He stutteringly thanked Ikehara, unable to believe that the legend knew his name and wondering what was happening. Ikehara then said they should start an additional test for him, suggesting they call it try to hit the strongest hunter at least once, which shocked him to his core. Ikehara Midori, a 23-year-old man, became a full-fledged hunter at the age of 9. No one could deny that he was the world's strongest hunter. Ikehara turned thousands of demons into ashes in an instant, and weak demons and even hunters could be easily killed with a mere fraction of his power. He single-handedly conquered the Pandemonium outbreak 10 years ago and the Kyushu outbreak 5 years ago, earning him the title of a living singularity. This is why it was such a shock when Ikehara told him to try to hit him at least once. Hinoki called out excitedly, urging him to lend his body to him immediately. Ikehara then explained the simple rule: if he could land a hit within the next minute, he would win. Even if he lost, there would be no punishment. Additionally, Ikehara would only attack once every 10 seconds. Ikehara assured him there was no need to worry, as he would go easy on him and he could use any skill he wanted, while Ikehara wouldn't use any skills at all. Ikehara then summoned a swarm of different weapons, telling him he could choose any weapon he liked. This surprised him, and he wondered what was happening. He was confused about the additional test and whether he could really fight the famous Ikehara Midori head-on in that 1-minute time frame. He asked Ikehara if he could really use any weapon, and Ikehara grabbed a katana, replying that he could use them absolutely because his body was harder than a katana. Ikehara then easily cut the katana in half, stating that his body was sharper than any sword. He snapped out of his thoughts when Hinoki shouted at him to hurry up and switch with him. Hinoki then angrily asked how dare Ikehara say such words, shouting that he couldn't forgive Ikehara now. This made him realize that Hinoki was getting excited and that Ikehara's power was at the same level as the founders, meaning he didn't stand a chance. Behind him, Hinoki was fuming with anger, staring at Ikehara. He sighed and faced Ikehara with a brave face. The students watched excitedly, shouting that something interesting was starting, a real battle with Ikehara. Hinoki asked what he was doing and was about to tell him to lend him his body quickly. But then Ikehara started the timer, smiling as he told him they should begin. He grabbed a sword and rushed at Ikehara to attack. Hinoki asked if he was planning on fighting alone, insisting it wasn't fair, but he continued to attack anyway, knowing it was meaningless. He knew for sure that to become a legend, he couldn't just borrow the power of the founders, he had to do it with his own power. He then tried to slash Ikehara, but Ikehara easily dodged without moving much. Kanagi continuously attacked Ikehara while Ikehara was on the phone, asking him which social media he was using and telling him that he was sure the incident would be recorded and go viral. The students couldn't believe that Ikehara was on his phone while effortlessly dodging all of Kanagi's attacks, shouting that Ikehara was incredibly strong. Despite his efforts, Kanagi couldn't land a single hit on Ikehara, who wasn't even taking the fight seriously. The students were amazed by Kanagi's relentless attacks, yet one of them thought something was off about his movements. They wondered how long the fight would continue while watching intently. Kanagi lifted his sword, feinting a vertical slash before switching to a horizontal one aimed at Ikehara's feet and throat, successfully executing the move. Kanagi was amazed at how his body could move exactly as he wanted, realizing he didn't tire from the movements. He wondered if it was the effect of lending his body to the founders, knowing his body was changing. His thoughts were interrupted when Ikehara placed a finger on Kanagi's head, preparing to flick him, and mentioned that 10 seconds had already passed. Fortunately, Kanagi dodged in time, but Ikehara's released power destroyed the field, making Kanagi realize that his head would have been gone if the attack had hit. Ikehara looked at his hand in confusion, thinking it was strange since he didn't sense any evil from Kanagi and couldn't believe he had mistakenly adjusted his output. Meanwhile, Kanagi panicked, knowing he would be killed at this rate, and tried to recall the feeling of his stronger self. He then released a strong aura, surprising Ikehara. Kanagi attacked Ikehara again, and the students were amazed by his increasing speed, though he still couldn't land a hit. The students shouted that the camera couldn't keep up with their movements. Ikehara noticed Kanagi's increased speed and sensed a different atmosphere, wondering if there was a condition to activate this power or if Kanagi wanted to keep it a secret. Realizing another 10 seconds had passed, Ikehara decided to attack Kanagi lightly this time. He bent down and positioned his finger to flick again, but this time he hit Kanagi in the chest, sending him slamming into the wall hard. Kanagi coughed up blood but thought it was awesome and marvelous to be fighting against the world's strongest awakened. He knew that if his body were the same as yesterday's and had taken that hit, he would already be dead. This realization made him smile because he knew it meant he was getting stronger. However, he also knew that with his current skill, he wouldn't be able to pass Ikahara's test. He decided to brute force his way through the remaining time he had and ran towards Ikahara again. Suddenly, Ikahara appeared next to him with incredible speed, making Kanagi stop and look to his side. Ikahara apologized and told him he had seen enough. He added that the 30 seconds were up, then hit Kanagi on the nape, causing him to slowly fall asleep. As Kanagi fell to the ground, Ikahara thought he could see that Kanagi was a genius, but not on the same level as his comrades. In the end, Kanagi couldn't fully demonstrate the power Ikahara had glimpsed. Ikahara called his secretary, telling her they should head back and expressing his disappointment with the result. Suddenly, Kanagi grabbed his sword, and Ikahara felt a strong aura behind him. Kanagi, now under Hinoki's control, asked Ikahara what he had said. Ikahara looked back and saw Kanagi releasing a powerful aura. Hinoki, controlling Kanagi's body, told Ikahara that the stubborn brat was already in bed, so he could finally use the body. Hinoki then walked closer to Ikahara and suggested they should play a little bit longer. Kanagi's spirit, out of his own body, panicked when he saw that Hinoki was now controlling it. However, Ikahara smiled, recognizing the presence he had felt earlier. This made him question if it was a different person or just a skill, but regardless, he knew that Kanagi was now a monster. Kanagi then attacked and shouted at him not to space out. He noticed that Kanagi's movements had changed, his speed and power were on a different level. Suddenly, Ikahara felt a sword near his face and ducked just in time to dodge it. Kanagi swung his sword again, and Ikahara leaped away to create distance. Still in shock, Kanagi positioned his sword and swung it once more, but Ikahara bent down in time, causing Kanagi to slash the building behind him instead. The students inside the building rushed away in panic, realizing the danger. Ikahara noticed that Kanagi's slashes were becoming unpredictable, yet he could anticipate his opponent's movements. It felt like ancient swordsmanship to him, like a torrent of water. Ikahara stretched out his palm, laughingly telling Kanagi that such skill was needed to defeat an S rank like him. He then raised his palm to make Kanagi sleep again, noting that only 40 seconds had passed. But Kanagi moved closer with incredible speed and swung his sword, shouting that there was no way Ikahara could hit him. Ikahara jumped away to dodge the attack and laughingly told Kanagi that his skills were amazing. The students couldn't believe what they were witnessing, or that Ikahara Midori was on the defensive. Kanagi shouted that Ikahara was boring and that there was no need to hold back against him. He also warned Ikahara that he would beat him up if he looked down on him. Kanagi then leaped to attack, but Ikahara laughed and replied, "Fine." He kicked a stone and it headed into the weapons behind him. All the weapons float in the air. Ikahara jumped, surprising Kanagi, and grabbed one of the weapons floating above them. He excitedly tells Ikahara that he's finally going all out. They then engage in an intense mid-air battle, foot on foot, stunning the students who watch in amazement. They grab every weapon in sight and shatter them into pieces with their sheer strength. Meanwhile, inside Kanagi's body, the founders observe Hinoki going full throttle. They are impressed that Ikahara manages to hold his own against Hinoki. One founder, feeling envious, remarks on the fun and pitiful nature of not being the one to fight while he watches in silence. One of the founders asks if this means Kanagi's body isn't yet a perfect vessel. An old man suggests joining the fray, but another founder tells him to stop, calling him tactless. The great wizard silently stares, surprised to realize that he is studying Hinoki's movements, trying to learn from them. He notices Hinoki pouncing from below, shifting his center of gravity, but the sword Hinoki wields shatters into pieces once again. Hinoki, frustrated by the low-quality sword, feels a surge of anger. Ikahara, on the other hand, finds the battle exhilarating, his heart racing with excitement. However, Ikahara notices that there are no swords left and wonders if Kanagi will resort to using firearms. Ikahara then taunts Hinoki, shouting that there are only 10 seconds left and teasingly asks what he'll do now. Hinoki glances back at the building behind him and leaps toward it. He heads for the man who had pushed Kanagi earlier and snatches the man's sword. Just then, Ikahara jumps closer, launching his fist at Hinoki, causing a loud explosion upon impact with the building. Fortunately, Hinoki dodges the attack and reappears in front of Ikahara. They resume their mid-air battle, foot on foot, enjoying the fight as if it were a game. Ikahara shouts that it's fun and suggests they continue a bit longer, while the students notice their building is on the verge of collapsing. The combatants reach the top of the building where Ikahara's secretary watches intently. Ikahara then places his hand on a huge fan and grabs it, causing it to crack. He sees Ikahara take out the fan from the headmaster's room and aims it at him. Ikahara then threw the fan at him, but he was surprised when Hinoki used his one-handed sword style to slash the fan before it hit him. The fan shattered into tiny pieces, and Ikahara shouted excitedly, telling him he was truly amazing. However, Hinoki simply launched his sword, telling Ikahara to eat it. Yet, to his shock, the sword shattered into pieces. Ikehara raised his hand, aiming at him. Ikehara then told him that 60 seconds had passed and launched his palm at Hinoki, causing him to fall. Hinoki cursed, but then Kanagi jumped onto Hinoki's back, shouting "not yet," and pushed Hinoki back towards the other founders. He then gently tapped Ikehara's palm aside, dodging Ikehara's attack, which shocked both Hinoki and Ikehara. However, one of his hands was dislocated from the impact. Still, he told Ikehara that he only needed a single hit and punched Ikehara in the face with his other hand. The battle between the singularities felt like it lasted an eternity from the inside, a fierce struggle for a seemingly small answer, akin to a chess game where both players are equally skilled. Hinoki knew that despite the intensity, it had only lasted a brief moment. He smiled proudly, realizing that Kanagi had opened a new path to victory. However, Kanagi was in shock when he saw that Ikehara had stopped his fist in time. He cursed, knowing he hadn't hit him, but then Ikehara smiled and pulled his fist to his face, surprising him. Ikehara then happily told him that he had passed before they both slammed into the ground. A moment later, the students watching were confused, asking what had happened. Ikehara, holding Kanagi, collapsed and called his secretary, Rin, telling her they should go back. Rin appeared next to Ikehara, asking how it went. Ikehara replied that Kanagi had passed and that he was interesting. But since he had accidentally broken Kanagi's arm, she should help fix it. She replied that she understood. The students, hearing Ikehara, couldn't believe that Kanagi had passed. Suddenly, they cheered for him, realizing that passing meant he had landed a hit on Ikehara, which woke Kanagi up. Rin, who was healing him, told him to let her heal his arm and not to move, which he agreed to, thanking her. Rin then congratulated him on passing the test. Kanagi thanked her for the compliment, but then sat up in shock, asking if he had really passed and if he had truly landed a hit on Ikehara. Suddenly, Ikehara appeared next to him, saying it was cruel for him to forget so soon, shocking Kanagi. Ikehara then told him that they were even now and a pass is a pass. He mentioned that he went serious midway through his consecutive attacks, but Hinoki didn't respond, knowing it was true. Ikehara also praised him, saying he dodged his strongest attack and his movements were amazing, urging him to be proud. Kanagi excitedly replied, yes. Kanagi then called out to Ikehara, asking what comes next after passing, making Rin look at Ikehara in confusion. Ikehara, also unsure, stared back at Kanagi, searching for an answer as the students watched intently. Later that night, at his house, his mother was frying food when she asked him how many guests were coming. While cleaning the house, he replied that he didn't know, probably only one person. His mother remarked that today was a good day, on top of passing the hunter's examination. He was being scouted by Ikehara Midori. She then told him that she always believed he was a kid who could achieve anything with effort. He warmly replied, yes. However, his mother worriedly commented that for such a celebrity to visit their house, it might be mistaken for a dog house. He shouted back that Ikehara was not that kind of person. After cleaning and helping his mother, he lay on his bed to rest and stared at Ikehara's card, wondering why Ikehara hadn't given it any thought. His mind wandered back to the field, recalling Rin taking Ikehara down and Ikehara screaming in pain. Ikehara had asked him if he didn't say he would become one of his comrades if he won. He replied, thinking he hadn't heard such words, making Rin more furious as she tightly grabbed Ikehara's feet, causing him to scream in pain. Ikehara then told him that there were too many eyes around and asked if he could visit his home tonight to discuss things in detail. He promised to explain the choices available and reveal who their real enemies were. He pondered who their real enemies could be, knowing that the tower was already destroyed by the founders and that the current hunter's task was to hunt the monsters that had escaped from the dimensional crack. He wondered if there was any other reason, but then he fell asleep. Suddenly, Hinoki shoutingly woke him up, startling him. He saw that Hinoki and the founders were there. He asked why everyone was there and what was wrong, but Hinoki simply replied that they had been discussing something and had just finished. Confused, he covered his body and asked Hinoki if they had decided who would get his body. Before Hinoki could reply, the doorbell rang. Apologizing to Hinoki, he explained that he thought Ikehara had arrived and suggested they talk about it later. He then walked to the kitchen near the door, noticing it was dark and wondering what was happening. To his shock, he saw his mother lying on the floor, collapsed. Panicking, he called out to her in worry. He rushed to his mother but stopped when he saw someone sitting in the kitchen. He saw the person grab the food his mother had made and eat it happily. Watching the man eat and compliment the food, he noticed the kitchen was a mess. The man teased him, saying he had to discipline his old lady and, if he wanted to impress customers, they should at least use expensive meat. He asked the man who he was and what he had done to his mother, but the man shouted at him to watch his mouth and introduced himself as Heitani Goru, the S-rank hunter who had come to pick him up and was one of Ikehara Midori's comrades. Heitani then told him to hurry up and take his luggage because they were moving to their base. Enraged, he launched his fist at Heitani, who dodged it and laughingly appeared behind him, asking if he was challenging him. He remained silent, remembering his mother telling him that even though his father had passed away, she would raise him alone to be a proud person. He recalled his mother's shoes being a mess, but she had told him it was fine and she could still wear them. She reminded him not to forget to buy himself new sneakers and congratulated him for doing a great job, promising to make his favorite tonkatsu for dinner. He then looked seriously at Heitani and demanded to know what he had done to his mother. Hinoki noticed that Kanaga's opponent was an S-rank hunter from that era and told everyone it was about time to act. Although he was annoyed just by looking at Ikehara's rip-off, they all knew from that fight how the founders should treat Kanagi from now on. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 2 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.